Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Rose Keegan ahau, ko Wheti Matarau te maunga, ko Awatere te awa, ko Hereripo te marae, ko te whakaari o te tangata, Ngāti Porou. When I first started with the bicultural histories, which is now CPR, I saw the volume of text and reading for each booklet for the kaupapa of bicultural histories, and it was quite immense. However, as I read the concepts and the aims from the social studies document right through all the intentions, I realised that there was a huge social perspective for Māori, and I realised also that there were a lot of whakaaro in there, both from history books of long ago, but mainly a view I'd never heard before, with the treaty, the transgressions of the treaty, and those are the topics that I covered. And when I opened the book, I saw everything set out in terms of what the big idea was, what the concept looked like, how did it pertain to the Ministry of Education documents, what whakaaro had taken place in history to this date under the topic of Treaty of Waitangi or transgressions of the Treaty of Waitangi. And I was floored by the amount of research that I hadn't heard of about these topics. I mean, I came from a rural background where harmony between two people existed, but underneath that little harmony in my own little rural town, there were etchings of racism, of stories of my whānau having sufferings under this type of embedment that I didn't know. I just thought we were peaceful and harmonic. But as I read through this bicultural booklet, first thing I did was put it down, because it brought back those memories of, wow, this answers some of the questions of Māoritanga for me in my life back then in the 60s, 70s. And secondly, I picked it up again and said, I'm reading this because this is going to develop what I need to know. And as I went through the book, I found the research really neat, as splendid in some areas, because I began to see viewpoints of where my parents spoke, my community and the Māori community spoke. I began to see from the experiences relating to the curriculum documents at all times, how people in the city felt the diversity of whakaaro, and also your identity. I started to question, how do I fit in this conundrum of ideas, mainly the politics that came from it and the viewpoints. So that book had, for me, like structure of both curriculum requirements, but also research to give me a viewpoint that counterbalanced what I'd read in history books. And the history books told me the narrative, beginning to the end. But they didn't tell me why my parents felt like that, and that's how I hitched and hooked to this document. Secondly, the activities that children had from the books, they were personalised so that children thought about the kaupapa. They thought about why they had laws, what's the difference between European law and Māori LORE law, and what that meant, and the whole concepts of these factors which affected development in Māori thinking and whakaaro. And I started reading through the research, and I even went on the internet to find out where these sources come from. They're all established. And I felt that the writer of this book had gone and made a discovery of things for us so that we could be better informed, and that's what I found when I read it. But also that the texts were emotionally attached to me as well. And my job then was to take those texts, give the children the views, balanced views, and then discover with the children, what is your response to these? What's our response together for the future? What's happening now, and explore it. And we had some wonderful discussions. We had courtroom layouts. We had lawyers come into the classroom to talk about the law and how it was made. We had kaimātua come along and talk. First time I actually followed the term overview down to the T. Everything was followed because it had order and integration, and it showed me how to carve and craft the children's thinking around the topics. And it also, in the book also, it had activities that were specific and related to what that concept was. The second time I went around and did the topic, I managed to look at that activity, digitize it, and start focusing and highlighting using the active boards the parts that I wanted the children to add their whakaaro to. I started using PowerPoints and photos to address just visuals, to static visuals to address the social situation at the time. I started making my own scrolls to fit with what a transgression, the words meant, the vocabulary that was there to unpack that for children. So I looked at what were the key activities in there and what was the main thinking around the activities. I used a whole curriculum to explore the key events in there as my way of making the resource come alive. And I was always conscious of making sure that there were all the social studies, key ideas and values were there. But I wanted those children to explore the beliefs that were held in there and their viewpoints. The children also developed their own ideas from the curriculum resource. I have 3 views for that stand out. The first one was from a parent with a law background.
Right.
I was very impressed with how children are aware of processes of the law and thinking about what that means, both in European world and Māori world, and also that the children were able to take part in a discussion about laws over 107 years. The second one was when a parent saw the children's work on display, when they read them and said, wow, these children are thinking more about political awareness of social situations for Māori and European in this country and Aotearoa generally. Can you do more studies around other areas? The third one was, why should my child learn this curriculum? It's so political. What are you doing to my child's mind? And I said, this is like a curriculum of a landscape for New Zealand. This is our bicultural heritage. If children are unaware of the official document and the way that we have 2 people living together and the Indigenous people in both sets have taonga, then they're not going to appreciate or understand the relationship in our country. But mainly importantly, we've never heard the Māori view before, and this is one of the safest ways we can deliver a curriculum where the children get an awareness and understanding. What responses come from that is purely from your child's heart. It's very balanced, it's very sound, because it's come from the document through to organic teacher delivery, and it's been researched. I think CPR is a curriculum that I think should be part of our wider curriculum, simply because we can understand why there is so much political upheaval that's unanswered when we travel. So when I travel New Zealand, you can hear it, the stories, you can feel the wairua coming through, and you wonder why people think the way they do. But when you have this curriculum of creation stories, of British Isles, of Treaty of Waitangi, transgressions, you begin to understand the full circle. One of the aspects that I liked about it was it educated me. It educated me with the viewpoints from a Māori perspective. I've often read 70s, 80s, 90s perspective of history books that have been about how European people have arrived and settled. I'd never heard the sufferings of a settlement. I'd never seen Aparihaka in its river journey. It's an eye-opener for our children to see the diversity and the wonder of Māori taonga, identity, social viewpoints, their total lens in life about their lifestyle, because it has beauty. And it has a lot of dynamic for New Zealand in terms of how Māori connect to the land. There's just a different interpretation that I think all children of New Zealand can appreciate. Okay. The CPR curriculum offers all children in the classroom perspective. It gives them understanding about their own cultures as well, and how they can link their own culture to some of the structures that we're looking at, how they can link to the laws from their culture, how they can link to the creation stories that they have, how they can walk through the different historical points, so they can do that comparison with children. And they have. The classrooms that I've taught in are diverse in nations. Secondly, it's wonderful because the children have they're learning about a culture, and they're finding out how people relate to each other and how they've related in history. on both sides. It's quite a balanced view. The third thing I find with children is that they begin to wonder and ponder about how people care, help, and live with one another. And they begin to see from their through their eyes what that world would look like in the past and how it could look in the future. So I often encourage thinking ahead. The fourth thing about children in the unit we had Pākehā history was that they could identify with who they were in the curriculum and where their ancestors came. And actually there was a beautiful bridge of interaction when people came to New Zealand. There was a sharing. But the one aspect I like was that the diversity of students in the class were able to be part of the study. They could study their heritage and bring that into the kete. They felt encouraged as a group and a whakaaro to share. And across the school, I would say that because they covered parts of the curriculum through each year, they were able to link in part how for Māori, for European, how they travel together.